8 decades of disappointment, 8 decades of shattered dreams, 8 decades of failure to meet the moment, in a nutshell. That is unfortunately the bleak picture of a UN that many of our forefathers from 1945, if they were still alive, would have struggled to accept. The Council is in fact a troublemaker as a result of the tacit, underhand and sometimes active complicity of some of its permanent members, who are themselves major actors and financiers of the crises of our time.
What happens when Africa exposes the lies and hypocrisies that America's power is built on? That moment happened just a few weeks ago, live at the United Nations, when a Burkina Faso representative, speaking on behalf of President Ibrahim Traoré, called out the very double standard that America condemns others for. And if you look closer, you'll see that a pattern of growing double standards is emerging under the Trump administration right now. In this video, we're going to highlight those double standards and reveal why America is now more desperate than ever to sell them to its own citizens, the global south, and Africa. Until we understand the way the game is being played, Africa will keep paying the price for a lie sold as truth. If you don't know me, my name is TJ, I'm Nigerian and British mixed, and on this channel, we talk about African geopolitics. So we start at the United Nations just a few weeks ago, where Burkina Faso's representative delivered one of the most powerful rebukes of Western hypocrisy we've ever seen. Speaking on behalf of President Ibrahim Traoré, he accused the United Nations Council of being manipulated by its own permanent members, nations that have positioned themselves as judges of the world while fueling wars, coups, and chaos for profit, particularly in his region. He said plainly that terrorism has become a pretext for resource theft in Africa, and that peacekeeping missions funded by billions often leave behind only frustration and dependency. He condemned the silence of the international community when Western allies violate international law and expressed open solidarity with Venezuela, Cuba, and others punished for asserting sovereignty. It was a speech that exposed the heart of the contradiction. Those who claim to defend democracy are the ones most actively undermining it.
It is my great honor and privilege to address you on behalf of President Captain Ibrahim Traoré. This is the oak anniversary after 80 years that should really lead for us to carry out an introspective assessment of what we have achieved. We have to be honest with ourselves. We should humbly recognize that even though globally there have been some achievements, there is rather a negative backdrop as a result of 8 decades of optimism that have been sorely put to the test, 8 decades of disappointment, 8 decades of shattered dreams, 8 decades of failure to meet the moment, in a nutshell. How can we understand the fact that Africa, the cradle of humanity, and where there are so many conflicts, and which represents more than 1 billion human beings, remains excluded from the Security Council's decision-making bodies? The Council is in fact a troublemaker as a result of the tacit, underhand and sometimes active complicity of some of its permanent members, who are themselves major actors and financiers of the crises of our time. That is what the Security Council has become. It has become a pernicious body, which, as a result of the predatory behavior of some of its permanent members.
Many of you have dropped comments asking how you can support this channel, even offering to donate or help financially. Until recently, I had no way to make this possible, but now through my Substack, it's never been easier for you to lend me some support. There's a free tier where you'll get 1 email per week, and for just $5 a month, about the price of a nice coffee, you'll receive a daily written update from all of my content, everything I produce. I'll be engaging with those of you who join, asking your thoughts on how to serve you and the continent better. Sometimes my videos do get demonetized, and there's also a small chance, as we saw with the Platform Africa stream, that a channel like this could be deplatformed. Even if the worst happens, we can regroup, rebuild, and keep pushing forward. We don't want any third party controlling this message, so with email backing us up, we can communicate directly. Thank you in advance for signing up. I look forward to connecting with you, not just on YouTube, but via email as well. But the double standard does not end at the United Nations. Across the ocean, the United States is facing its own crisis of legitimacy. Reports keep surfacing that Donald Trump and his allies are seeking a legal loophole that could allow him to pursue a third term in office, something that when happens in Africa is openly condemned by the international community. Steve Bannon even bragged about it publicly.
So Trump 28, Trump is going to be president in 28, and people just ought to get accommodated with that.
So what about the 22nd Amendment?
There's many different alternatives. At the appropriate time, we'll lay out what the plan is, but there's a plan, and President Trump will be the president in 28. We had longer odds in 16 and longer odds in 24 than we got in 28. And President Trump will be the president of the United States, and the country needs him to be president of the United States. We have to finish what we started. And the way we finish it through Trump. Trump is a vehicle. I know this will drive you guys crazy, but he's a vehicle of divine providence. He's an instrument. He's very imperfect. He's not churchy, not particularly religious, but he's an instrument of divine will. And you could tell this of how he's pulled this off. We need him for at least one more term.
In a world that has long been lectured by Washington on a constitutional order, this is more than irony. It is exposure. For decades, America has used the language of democracy as the weapon against others. But now, the mask is slipping. The same actions it condemns abroad are now emerging within its own borders. And let's be clear, when we talk about America here, we are not speaking about ordinary American citizens. We're speaking about the mechanism of control that runs the country, the system that uses democracy as disguise for power. And propaganda is how empires sustain themselves, how it manufactures consent, and how it keeps people divided while it maintains control. But that illusion is cracking. Even within the United States, more and more citizens are beginning to see the system for what it is, a structure built to protect power, not people. The polarization tearing America apart right now is not random. It is the symptom of a system eating itself from within. That disillusionment has begun to spill over across the world. It is showing up in the growing Gen Z protests sweeping across Asia and now reaching into Africa. It is visible in Europe, where citizens are flooding the streets in protest because of the influx of migrants and the policies that have allowed it to escalate, expressing frustration over what they see as an invasion that betrays their sense of national stability and dignity. The irony here is this crisis has created conditions where people across Africa and the Middle East feel they have no hope in their own countries, forced to take dangerous trips across the Mediterranean towards Europe, with many losing their lives along the way. When they arrive in Europe, the European citizens grow angry at what they call an invasion, a bitter irony, considering that invasion would not exist if the masters of those same economies had not created the predatory relationships with the migrants' homelands, keeping them destabilized and stripped of opportunity. And it is glaringly clear in the hypocrisy of European reparations, which I spoke about a few videos ago, where leaders planned to fund Ukraine's military using Russia's seized assets, calling it reparations, while refusing to even acknowledge the centuries of debt owed to Africa, which Africa calls reparations. The system of moral bankruptcy is no longer hidden. It is being televised daily, and it is on the internet for everyone to see. Even Europe's economic decisions are backfiring. The Dutch government's forceful seizure and nationalization of Nexperia, a private company with Chinese ownership, was justified on grounds of political disagreement and security fears, but it was essentially a state takeover of private assets. When African nations, such as members of the Alliance of Sahel States, nationalized their own gold or uranium sources to protect sovereignty and fund their people's development, Washington and Brussels call it a violation of international norms. Yet Europe does the same under different names, calling it security or sovereignty, and even receives praise. This double standard is exactly what we're getting at right now in today's video. This is how power is exercised and judged in the global system right now. The West has become trapped by its own arrogance, unable to build fair partnerships or mutual respect. It is the same pattern that has played out in Africa for decades: short-term control over long-term collaboration. One of the clearest examples that I found of this hypocrisy came when Julius Malema of South Africa's EFF was confronted in a Western interview for expressing solidarity with Russia. The interviewer accused him of supporting a war criminal because Vladimir Putin is wanted by the International Criminal Court.
You know that the International Criminal Court wants Vladimir Putin to face war crimes charges.
It must start with Tony Blair. It must start with George Bush. It must go to Barack Obama. Then it can go to Putin.
So let's get this
So
straight.
let's
You're
be-
saying to me
and-
that
and
your
even-
policy, if you were in power in South Africa, is quite simple. That your enemy's enemy, and it seems you regard the US and its allies as the enemy,
Yes.
your enemy's enemy
Yes.
is your friend. Never mind if he's a suspected war criminal, never mind if the UN and the ICC say they have compelling evidence of Russian war crimes. You don't care. As far as you're concerned, my enemy's enemy is my friend.
You're exaggerating, but another point which you don't want me to go there is that Tony Blair accepted that they were wrong about Saddam Hussein to an extent that he did an apology of a thug, right? You have never called for his arrest. A man admitting that I was wrong. To how many people died there?
But here lies another glaring contradiction. The same international court has accused Benjamin Netanyahu of war crimes, yet the United States continue to fund and arm this government. Netanyahu has ruled Israel for roughly 17 and some change years, one of the longest tenures of any Western leader, yet Israel's politics is still described as democratic. The same favorable and respected perspective is not made when similar long-term leaders maintain power and control of their states in Africa. Now, I'm not saying that African guys have got it right, but there is a hypocrisy in not viewing the same behavior in the same light. The truth is simple. What we are witnessing is the decay of the global order built on double standards. A system that divides the world into those that can act with impunity and those that must obey. This system has run its course. The cracks are widening from Washington to Brussels to Tel Aviv. And Africa, for the first time in a long time, is beginning to refuse to play along. In this system, there will always be haves and have-nots, the winners and the losers. But there's a chance for us to make something much more fairer, only if we stop continuing to play by these Western rules. It is time to make a change. It is time to build a system based on fairness, respect, sovereignty, and parity. But until that happens, it is Africa's job to remain a mirror reflecting back the world's truth that the leaders of the Western system don't want to see. I would love to know what you guys think about this out there, particularly the reports about Donald Trump pushing for a third term. But if you have nothing to say, would it be too much for me to ask you to write in the comment section, no more double standards? It just lets me know that you watched the video to the end, you support the channel, you like the message, and you want me to continue. Thank you so much for watching today, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.